This episode brought to you by Cafe Imports, Minneapolis-based importers of fine specialty green coffees. Independently owned and operated since 1993, Cafe Imports has been dedicated to decreasing its impact on the earth through renewable energy, carbon neutrality, and by supporting conservational efforts in places where quality coffee is grown and also where quality coffee is consumed. Where does your coffee come from? Welcome to the Lake Superior Podcast. I'm Walt Lindala.
And I'm Frida Waara. We are made stronger by story, and there's no better source than the continent's largest body of fresh water, Lake Superior.
So join us as we highlight the 5 national parks that ring this greatest of the Great Lakes, meet the people, tour the places, and learn about the projects that make these parks and body of water so remarkable.
This podcast made possible with the support of the National Parks of Lake Superior Foundation and Media Brew Communications.
I'm Walt Lindala.
And I'm Frida Waara.
Welcome once again to the Lake Superior Podcast. Today, Frida, we've got something really cool, especially for me as a Copper Country boy growing up in the Chassell area and in the Houghton and Calumet area. There's a great performance venue there known as the Calumet Theater, and something special's coming up, too.
Absolutely. You know, we talk a lot about the 5 national parks on Lake Superior for their beauty, their outdoor beauty, the vistas, the amazing shoreline in the water. But when you come right down to it, it's also history. And like you said, Walt, your stomping ground up there, it's the Upper Peninsula of the Upper Peninsula when you talk about the Keweenaw.
Yes.
And it's really exciting to have this gal with us today.
Well, we're joined today on the podcast by Penny Menze, who is a musician there and also a Calumet Theater member, and also the president of the Calumet Theater, Dan Jamison. Good day. Welcome to the podcast.
Have a nice day, and we're having a nice day.
Yes.
Great to be here. Thank you, Walt and Frida. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, we're happy to have you guys on. Before we get into this event and a little bit, Penny, about what's going to be happening and what you're doing at it, Dan, as the Calumet Theater president, for the benefit of those that are listening to our podcast, can you tell us just a bit about the Calumet Theater and also how it works within the Keweenaw Historical Park?
Sure, and I'll start with the fact that it's in the Keweenaw Historical Park. In the Park Service, in total, there are only 3 theaters. One of them is Ford Theater in Washington, Wolf Trap, and the Calumet Theater. As you might guess, that puts us up there in rare company. This is a heritage site supported more in depth by the Park Service, but it's also an operating theater. It has been operating for 125 years since it was built in around 1900. It's on the State Register of Historic Places. All of the original elements of a theater meant to perform acoustic services still exist here. So you could have a show in here with no electronics, no amplification, any of that, and it sounds stunning.
And a truly a gem of an historic facility. I mean, the design and everything. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, it's a design that's fairly common for theaters of this vintage. The reason they were all built roughly the same was so a show could travel from theater to theater and not have to completely redo its sets, its curtains, its lighting, or any of that. So the stages are all remarkably the same. As they were built before the age of electronic amplification, there are many theaters across North America and around the world that I have visited that still have this capability to this day. The people that built them understood how sound propagated and how light propagated, and they built those functions and facilities into all of the similar ones around the world. I was fortunate enough to be a stagehand for about 20 years, and I took shows into theaters and arenas and stadiums around the entire world, and I've been into many of them around the world that look exactly like this, but not nearly as well preserved, maintained, or even kept to their traditional attributes.
That gives me goose pimples. What they knew, it's kind of like that classic, amazing whole generation of musicians, too, because it was so important. I mean, we have to describe a little bit about what Calumet was 120 years ago. It was a bustling place because we were trying to basically electrify the world, and they were pulling the copper out of Calumet to do it. So the people that played here 125 years ago, they were not just, the run-of-the-mill, I guess, neighborhood performers. They were some big stars.
Yeah, Dan, there's been some big names that have played that theater, isn't there?
There have been. My favorite one, though, is as I walked on the stage the first time, and I've been coming here since I was a kid, to see shows in the summer when we came up. Walking the stage, I noticed a door cut into the floor of the stage, and that was for Harry Houdini to do his disappearing act.
Mm-hmm.
And he would drop through that hole in the stage into the dressing rooms down below, and that's still here. We use it now for putting, costumes and stuff down instead of down the stairs. But Houdini disappeared from this theater. How cool is that?
That's fascinating. Also with us on the podcast today is Penny Menze, who is a musician, a Calumet Theater member. And Penny, let's talk a little bit about this. I mean, you've been around. You've been in Tennessee, Texas. Your home is in Calumet. What is there that really attracts you to this, and in particular, doing shows at the theater?
Well, what brought me back up here, it's full circle for me. I was born in Marquette and left when I was young. So after playing music for years and going to Nashville, I'm playing music there. Towards this part of my life, what brought me back here was my parents in, a stage of their life where they wanted to come home and they needed care. And I remembered, in Calumet, my mom was from Calumet. She was born and raised in Schuette's Bar. She's a Schuette. And that was in the family for 70 years, which is right next door to the Calumet Theater. So coming back here, I came up here as a child. I would stay upstairs at the bar with my grandparents. But I never came to the theater. We would go to Eagle Harbor and here. But coming back here, years later, 30 years later, I was like, what happened here? So I started reading some of the history. I knew it was a copper mining town. And then I quickly realized after all these years in Nashville, just kind of floating around, I realized this is what I'm supposed to be writing about. Okay. The history, what happened here, how my family got here, and then listening to the stories from everybody in town of how their families got here and the food. It wasn't just my mom that cooked us this certain food. Everybody up here did, the sarma, the cabbage rolls, the pasties, and just the generations of people like yourself, from up here, and the love they have of the copper country, mm-hmm. and how they enveloped me, how they brought me in. I had to stay. My parents are gone now, but look what they gave me. I have this whole community and I have a home, and this is what I'm writing about now. This is my life's work. So I still live in Nashville, and I got a place in Texas now. I'm going to be promoting a lot of my story to the film industry in Austin. And again, it's just all based here now. It's roots-based. And after all these years of floating around being butterfly, I finally have my roots. And then I've played the Calumet Theater a couple times. And to me, the Calumet Theater is like the Ryman stage. When I'm up there singing, halfway through my show, I just start thinking about what happened in this town and how many people have played on that stage. And usually I do cry a little bit whenever I play the Calumet Theater. To me, it's like the Ryman of the North. And my family at Schuette's Bar never went to a show. They didn't mix with the social. There were social class differences back then. They worked and they handled the patrons that came to the theater. But the theater's just everybody loved the theater,
Penny, your story has such power and it has such strength to it. But how in the world, girl, are you luring some of these great musicians out of Nashville to come to the frozen tundra in March? How are you doing it? Really? Tell us here.
This is the amazing thing about the songwriters, out of Nashville, the heart and soul of the songwriter and the song. We had Joe Nichols scheduled to be here last year. Marlon Lee, who was running the theater, had a great lineup last year. And because of the cancellations of COVID, finally Joe's group had to cancel. And so I brought up, hey, how about bringing in the songwriter that wrote some of, Joe Nichols' biggest hits. And the theater president, Dan, here is, he's just, lowering or tearing down the walls of the theater and just bringing in everybody now. And he said, yeah, bring him up. And it was always my dream to get the songwriters up here. I knew that they would catch on to the heart and soul of this area, and this was my opportunity. So I just simply, to answer your question, I just simply called Gary, who wrote one of Joe's biggest hits, Tequila Makes Your Clothes Fall Off. I just called him and asked him, and he said yes, and he jumped on a plane the next day. He had some kind of cancellation, so he was able to jump on the plane, and he kind of knew of the story that I was writing, and he came up for the experience, and the town just took him in. They were so excited that he was coming here. Next thing I knew, they just rolled out the red carpet, everybody here, and he was hooked. And he's been doing a hit concert series, traveling the country. And so he went back to Nashville, talked to his friends, and he goes, when can we come up there, Penny? He goes, I want to come up this winter.
Does he know?
Yeah, does he know what he's getting into?
I don't think they know what they're in for yet, and I haven't described any of it. I think I want them just to experience it.
Yeah.
But I thought it'd be great to get them here during Copper Dog Weekend, because there's so much. If you come up here during Copper Dog Weekend, you can feel what the town must have felt like 100 years ago. The energy, the heartbeat comes alive during that weekend. But the dogs are off and running on Saturday. They're gone. So there was nothing historically to do on Saturday. So Gary was like, yeah, that sounds like a great weekend. So we've got Gary Hannan, who's written hits for Brad Paisley, Garth Brooks, Daryl Worley, Montgomery Gentry. He's invited Wynn Varble, who's had 3 number ones, and of course has also written songs for Garth Brooks, Trace Atkins, all those guys, Willie Nelson, and Clinton Daniels, who had another hit with Joe Nichols. He wrote Broken Heartsville, that song, the song that says, here's to the past that can kiss my glass. Just some of Joe's great songs. Anyways, these guys are coming up. Again, they're leaving golfing weather in March.
We're talking with Penny Menze today, who is a musician and Calumet Theater member, and Dan Jamison, who is Calumet Theater president, about not only the Calumet Theater and its part in the Keweenaw Historical Park, but also about a special show. And Penny, we're kind of leaning into that. Give us the details about what's going to be happening, when, where, all of that. You're kind of touching on some of the performers that are coming, but what's the details of this special show coming up?
Okay, the guys will be here on Saturday, March 5th, for their show. The doors open at 7. Show starts at 7:30. There's 3 Nashville hit songwriters. Again, they've had number 1 hits and CMA and ACA awards, Country Albums of the Year. These guys are coming up to do a hit song, to perform their songs. What's great about that too is instead of having Garth Brooks, you have his hit songs. You have
right.
The guys that wrote. You've got 30 artists, 30 stars because you have their songs.
Sure, exactly.
And what's great is they're telling their stories of how they came up with the songs. You're getting their life. These songwriters, you're experiencing, their life, what they've gone through, and when Gary came up, we had a day's notice, and the people that found out within 24 hours, they came with song lyrics. They came to talk to Gary. It was just really exciting. It brought the creativity level in the house up a notch. People walked away going, hey, I've always wanted to write a song, or I'm inspired to write a book now. The inspiration that these guys bring. And anyways, it's just It was great to bring all kinds of talent into the theater.
It sounds like it's going to create a very special evening, an intimate evening with these songwriters, and they're telling their stories. Dan, in terms of this being a concert, in terms of helping out the theater, because, of course, that's something that I know you're always looking at doing is getting funding together and so on. Tell me a little bit about, with this concert, perhaps how maybe some of the funds that are raised with it, and then even looking beyond that, maybe some of the future plans you have at the Calumet Theater.
Sure, it's a good segue because the theater was built because the mines were financed by Boston investors. And the Boston investors had a certain feel for how communities should be built and developed. We're going to try to return to that by being, sounds trite and cliche, but a gem of the community. Mm-hmm. We've got the Park Service who has engaged in engineering to look at the building and determine everything that needs to be done to restore the building historically. We've got the village who has half the hall and brings people in for village functions. And our job is to fill the other half of the house with entertainment. And that entertainment can be everybody from, big name acts. We had Edgar Winter on the stage a few years ago. Songwriters and talent such as that, but also want to get the high school local performers and things of that nature on the stage. The monies that we have coming in from, the money types of acts will go to support the employees that have to be here full time to keep this thing operational. It's going to support the utilities because we pay the utilities for the building, for the village who owns the building. And it allows us to get more equipment or repair the equipment that we have. So it's a nice three-legged stool of operating partners. Mm-hmm. And we can focus on the things that we do best, which is put on a heck of a show.
And can we still get tickets to that show?
Yes, you can go to calumettheater.com. It's CALUMETTHEATRE, because we're special, .com.
Is there also information? Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, you can click on the link for events and you can buy your tickets online. There's a seating chart that's there, and click and buy. And we're keeping them between $20 and $30 instead of $70 because the idea is to make sure that since we're presenting in the middle of the Copper Dog 150 dog sled races, we want to be part of the community, not take people away from all of the other events that are happening.
Well, when you look at that also with that website, Dan, I'm sure there's information there about also becoming a member of the Calumet Theater. And even before we give them that info one more time, Dan, maybe Penny, you can answer this. Why should somebody consider becoming a member of the Calumet Theater?
Well, you get the inside information. You feel like you're a part of this theater, community. You have a say. It's board member driven. I do know that they are going to start forming, groups and committees where you can be involved and help the theater using your talent.
Members get a discount on the ticket sales, but more importantly, you get to put your voice into what you think the theater should be and what it should present. Because by far the membership up here that's local, even though they reside in other parts of the country when it gets cold, they remember what was in this theater, who played this theater, and what they enjoyed about it. And we would like to have them have a voice in making that thing happen again.
It really sounds pretty good. That website again for you guys is?
CalumetTheater.com, spelled CalumetTheatre.com.
And Dan and Penny, talking about that songwriting, do you see that in the future, in addition to performances, there'll be songwriting workshops?
Yes, Gary has put on workshops, and what's great about that is people can attend the workshop and have one-on-one conversations and guidance from a hit songwriter from Nashville. So Gary, and we thought we would have those in the summertime, of course. So that Gary wants to come back and go fishing. He wants to experience the copper country. So he plans, I think, he plans on coming up every winter and summer. But the summertime, he would grab, a different assortment of songwriters each time that he comes. And, have these one-on-ones.
I think that's really pretty cool because as somebody that is a musician myself, just this idea of having the ability to interact with experienced professional songwriters, learn a few things, but then also get them to perform in a venue like that. I mean, I know from personal experience of playing the Calumet Theater stage exactly what you guys are talking about with the acoustics, the way it sounds. I mean, I've played in there electric, but I've also had the opportunity to play on that stage acoustic with nothing else. And you don't need anything. And for this kind of thing in particular with these singer-songwriters, it's the perfect venue. I can see why you've got them coming and being willing to do it. And Dan and Penny, that's got to be a credit, just from what you have. You talk about it, Dan, in particular. We want to make it into a gem into the community. If you've got world-class musicians that are willing to make the trip because it's just such a cool place to play and cool place to be, you can't beat that, can you?
Well, actually, I can because during Halloween we had a trunk or treat thing where we brought all the kids dressed in their Halloween costumes through the backstage door onto the stage. They played, bean toss and bag toss and stuff like that. But without exception, every kid that came through that side door and stepped on the stage looked to the left up into the theater. Probably about half of them walked to the front center of the stage and either clapped their hands or said, "No," and they could hear it come back. And you could see the look on their face. The hook was set. They're lifers in this thing. The one little kid said, "Yeah, I played here a couple times when I was 5. And it was amazing." And I said, "Well, how old are you now?" And he said 6.
I love it. Oh,
you're setting the hook for performance. It's all uphill and then actually downhill from there too. So that's good. I appreciate it.
Well, you touched on the world class musicians, and what's amazing to me is I've been in Nashville about 23 years. So it took years to build relationships there. So to be able to have these guys come here and just be able to meet them is incredible. And I'm just so, that thought of them even coming is so, I'm just so humbled by it. I mean, these guys are really special for doing this, and it's just such a great thing for the community. So I hope you come to the show, Walt, and I hope that you put some shows together for the stage, too, in the future.
Well, I would hope to have the opportunity to do that and kind of get back with the establishment with the theater and everything, because it is, I can tell you, a wonderful place to see the show, because I went there as a kid way back when with my parents to see, Frankie Yankovic and the Tamburitsons and all of that, and then performing there and through the 80s in high school. And Frida and I both know the place because it is like very few theaters, especially from the perspective of this connection to the Keweenaw Historical Park. Before we cut you guys loose today, I just want to open it up that, is there any other things that you would like the listeners to this podcast know about the Calumet Theater?
Well, I'll talk to you a little bit about the Calumet Theater in the setting that it's in. And you mentioned the Park Service. You can walk end to end, 5th Street, 6th Street, 7th Street, and see an amazing collection of history, buildings, people. And the Park Service is doing a great job of teaching the docents how to interpret those sites, how to interpret the theater, how to tell people, what went on and what these things are for. So it's not just the theater, it's everything in the surrounding community. All roads kind of sort of lead to the theater, but there's a lot of really cool stuff on the way.
I can't help but feel, too, that the generations past and that spirit, because I grew up, my grandpa was a miner, and there was never a time at a family gathering that there wasn't music. Yeah. To a Finn, that was the way that they told the story, or that the way they came together. The old joke about you can tell an extrovert Finn because they're looking at your shoes instead of their own. But as soon as the music starts playing, everything changes.
Yeah.
And what that means, I'm so grateful that Penny and Dan, you guys have so much gumption that you're luring these guys out of golf season and bringing them to a place where, the snowbanks can get 2 stories high. We've got snowplows as high as a house around here. Yeah. And not only that, but then showing them that all the fun for the weekend is going to take place basically outdoors because it's a sled dog race. So you're not going to bring in a team of sled dogs, down the street in July. You're going to have to do that in the start of March, and showing them that we embrace whatever it is that comes in your life, but it gets laced with music and performance. And that's just going to be a magical experience for them. I can't wait to hear that story. And more than anything, to be in the audience to hear their reaction.
Yeah. And I think
that's what's going to be so amazing. Yes.
Yeah, it's going to be an amazing night. Real quick, it's happening again, when, where, and how do folks get tickets and find out more about the theater?
Sure. Doors open at 7 o'clock on Saturday evening, March 5th. Show goes on at 7:30. You can buy tickets at calumettheatre.com, CalumetTheatre.com. Click on the events link, and it'll take you right to a seating chart. Pick your seats. There's no bad seats in a place like this.
No, there isn't.
I think, as importantly, for our listeners' experience, Gary and his guys, when Gary played up here, it was Gary's birthday, and it was the first time he ever got a birthday cake on stage and had the audience sing to him.
Nice.
He has an interest in traveling around the perimeter and up the middle of the Keweenaw to see all things in a different state. And I have no doubt that it's going to appear in some of the guys' catalogs going forward because, Gary makes a point of saying his songs are experience-driven, and he's born in South Africa, been through the entire world, and there is something in his catalog for each of his experiences. And this is new stuff for them. It's going to, enable them to write about new stuff that they haven't encountered before. Now, I had thought of taking them down to the Uper Museum so that they can get the Grandma Got Run Over by a Reindeer collection. But we'll save that for another time.
Some other time, yeah.
And we better make sure that they've got a good chook and their choppers and their swampers are warm and working on that Stormy Cromer. Yeah, there's going to need to be a Stormy Cromer, and certainly to get them, I don't know if they want to take a few runs at Mount Bohemia, but
that might be a bit much. That might be
cap it off for them for sure.
Hey, you guys, really thank you for joining us today. This has really been wonderful. The history, the creativity, the energy that you've shared with us about the theater, the show, and music. We really appreciate your time today, and hopefully we'll get some folks to come to the show, but also just take a look at what the Calumet Theater has to offer. Thanks, you guys.
It's a brand new chapter.
Yeah.
Thank you, and looking forward to you guys coming back up and getting immersed again.
Yes, thank you, Walt and Frida.
It's Penny Menze, who is a musician and Calumet Theater member, and also Dan Jamison, who is the president of the Calumet Theater. Frida, that was just a great conversation with them. The energy.
Yes, and the heroes, really, to know that what they've got there and then sharing it with the world and bringing it back. It's just, I'm so excited. I mean, we know the gems that are all around this lake, but there's still a lot to discover, and it's the people. It's always the place, but the people of this place are just spectacular.
Well, we appreciate both Dan and Penny giving us their time today. We also appreciate you giving us your time to listen to the Lake Superior podcast. If you got ideas, follow the links with this posting of this interview, and make sure that you let us know if there's some ideas maybe that you want us to talk about, because we're happy to talk about all of these things with these national parks around Lake Superior.
Absolutely. And we really do want that feedback, because we want to get better at this, and telling the story of Lake Superior is what it's all about.
Well, that's going to do it for us on this edition of the Lake Superior podcast. I'm Walt Lindala.
I'm Frida Waara. Thanks for listening. The National Parks of Lake Superior Foundation, NPLSF, is the only official nonprofit 501c3 fundraising partner of the National Park Service for all 5 U.S. national park sites on Lake Superior.
To learn more about NPLSF projects and programs, you can visit the website at nplsf.org or friend them on Facebook.
I'm Frida Waara.
And I'm Walt Lindala. Thanks for listening to the Lake Superior podcast.
This podcast made possible with the support of the National Parks of Lake Superior Foundation and Media Brew Communications.
This episode brought to you by Cafe Imports, Minneapolis-based importers of fine specialty green coffees. Independently owned and operated since 1993, Cafe Imports has been dedicated to decreasing its impact on the earth through renewable energy, carbon neutrality, and by supporting conservational efforts in places where quality coffee is grown and also where quality coffee is consumed. Where does your coffee come from?